All right, so for our review discussion today, we are talking about the third part of the Count of Monte Cristo. And what we've got here is kind of a couple different things going on from part 3 of the novel, again, chapters 53 through 73 of that slightly abridged version of the Count of Monte Cristo. Far and away, vast majority of the questions dealt with the character of Valentine. And Valentine, gosh, between her poisoning, between was she alive, was she not, how did that work, any of that stuff, that's where a lot of your questions came from. So please, those of you following along with the live stream on it, when you get into the Hangout on Air, there should be a little set of your usual Google squares in the upper right after you're into it, and you should be able to get into the question answer piece there. I think it says Q&A right on it. Looks like a little talk bubbly kind of thing. So please, again, feel free to chime in, because this first one, there are a lot of different questions about the character of Valentine. So the first thing really that people were talking about with was, why was she being poisoned? That would deal with whose inheritance she stood to get in the way of with it. We also had kind of the unrequited love piece with her about who people were pledged to be engaged to and things like that. So how does this get dealt with? Initially, it looks like she's poisoned, that she dies, and we've got another rogue poisoning type character out there. But this is, again, a part of what the Count is doing. This is another one of his machinations to mess with the lives of the suitors with this. With all of this, Valentine appears dead initially with this. And so another phase of questions that people had were asking, how does she not, isn't she buried? Doesn't she suffocate? How does she stay alive? And you'll encounter this when we, with the next text that we get into, Romeo and Juliet as well with this, that people of money in cities within Europe, a lot of it, they weren't buried in the ground. Richer families would have what we call mausoleum. It would be a structure. It would be an above ground thing. Some of it was a way that you could show you had money with things. Some of it was a sanitary thing, just in terms of when you had that kind of a population density of people living within an area. So Valentine was probably not put into the ground with this. She was not, there wasn't a grave dug into the earth and she was lowered in, and then how do they, do they feed a straw in there? What do they do? Kind of thing. That's not the case. It was probably a case where her body would not have been embalmed or anything like that. That was not anything going on. She's probably kept in a family crypt or mausoleum, which was kind of a big building, very simple, usually inside structure that had lots of shelves for coffins with it, so that she would not have been put somewhere where she would suffocate, is the first thing. Presumably, if the Count knows enough to be able to put her into this kind of death-like coma to be able to play out the kind of things going on with the suitors, we have to then kind of similarly presume that he could do things to check on her to make sure that she would not be dying via some other means with this. So Valentine's life, again, this is a case of a living pawn of someone that's, really treated like an item in an overall plot. And how does this affect, Max and some of these other characters with it? she kind of becomes an object with it. And this goes back to this idea of the Count weaponizing a human being, basically turning into a weapon someone's life with this. And now in Valentine's case, she doesn't die. She comes back and is reunited, and that's wonderful. Pulls her guy back from the brink of depression and death. But she's manipulated a great deal with this. And this kind of, again, lends us to that motif of manipulation, and how much of that are we okay with? So that's kind of a lot of what we have going on with Valentine, with the poisoning, with her perceived death, and how she isn't actually really dead within that. What happens to the conspirators? We have all these conspirators. You would think in more of your traditional revenge kind of story that that they'd be just killed. One of the only things that I really enjoyed from the Count of Monte Cristo film with Jim Caviezel is Luis Guzman playing the character of Jacopo. Does a great job. He delivers a speech when they first discover the treasure about how, oh, you want these people dead? I've got a gun. We'll kill them, bam, bam, and we'll go party, or something like that. Basically what he says. And that's not good enough for the Count in both the film or the novel. And in the novel, we really get into this idea of suffering, the conspirators and their suffering. And part of this is the idea of prison, in terms of what does prison do to you, and what kind of a prison would generate the most suffering for the given conspirators here. And kind of like the suitors in the Odyssey, whose brutal, grisly deaths were kind of reflections of their character. A coward being stabbed in the back, the one who talked the most being stabbed through the jaw, these kinds of things. The way that the way the conspirators suffer is supposed to be a part of a reflection on what they did to Dantes with this. The man who helped starve his father got to become a rich man, but then starve himself with this. So not only is the rise and the arc of their triumph, supposedly, the way they gain from putting Dantes in prison, but that they're raised to that height so that they can fall even farther. And I think it's an important point that they're usually imprisoned. They're not outright killed. We do have one that dies by his own hand, but again, that's a reflection of this idea of pride or of honor and public appearance with things. So the fate of the suitors, be careful that you know who they are. What did they do to Dantes? What did they do to the people that Dantes loved? And that is reflected in their suffering in the end of the novel. And that simple death is just plain not good enough in terms of Dantes's mind with this. And a lot of questions ended up with the Edmund, Haiti, Mercedes pseudo kind of not love triangle between the three of them. And I wanted to kind of go back with this idea of it not being a love triangle, knots and three. And yeah. It's not really a love triangle at all. It's often portrayed in film versions as such, but if you look at the novel, the big question is, when does Mercedes realize that the Count is Edmund? There's a lot to point to that she probably realizes it very early on with this. But yet, it's not your typical Hollywood ending where they end up together and everything's wonderful and 2.5 children and a dog in the suburbs. That's not how it ends. in the novel, Haiti is who Edmund ends up with, and it isn't the relationship between them isn't terribly realized. Mercedes ends up talking about how she's possibly going to end up in a convent, something to that effect. Not that she is going to end up with him, that this great love is going to be rekindled. That's not it for Mercedes. Both she and her son kind of resign themselves to being nomads, and that they're going to wander and kind of make their own fate. Uh, and we're not really given a lot in the end of the novel to point to anything else. Haiti is who the Count ends up with. It's kind of his consort. This is problematic. This is problematic because, well, he bought her as a slave. There's no way around that. Now you can say, yes, he's delivering her from freedom. True, but again, we go back to the idea of a person's life being turned and crafted into a weapon. Because Haiti's life was, again, used to destroy the lives of one of the conspirators with this. She is a part of his overall plot and his plan throughout all this. So you can't really say it's some great love that he ends up with. I don't know that we have a lot textually to support that either. But Haiti's who he ends up with. It seems that she is happy with him. It seems that she is intelligent and seems as though she is an equal. But again, we've got a notion here of how this is all working out in terms of who he ends up with. So it's leading up to that very kind of, I don't know, problematic sort of ending with this as well, in terms of the wait and hope. Is that enough for people? That's a big question with this. So let's take a look, see if the questions piece has been working at all in this or not. We got any Q&A stuff coming up here? Okay. Doesn't look like that part was working out well, or we don't have them. So what I'll do